Afternoon to my viewers. It is Shirley with Spirit of Matter, and this is a special episode dedicated to Uranus in the chart of Israel. So, this is a special episode because Israel is a country that will be having Uranus return in the next decade. And it's going to be the first Uranus return for Israel. Uranus takes about 80 years to surround the zodiac and return to the same degree. And so for countries like the United States, that's approaching its Uranus return too, with Uranus in Gemini, we've already seen what happens. And I referred you to the astrology podcast. I think it was with Nick Dagan Best, that explored detail by detail all the Uranus related events in the chart of the United States. So the revolution, the civil war. Okay, Uranus in Gemini is very much about the civil war, and now the United States is heading for another one, for another Uranus return to Gemini, and right after it, or a couple of years after it, will be Israel's first Uranus return. So Israel was born as a country in 1948, 1948, with the Declaration of Independence, which is the chart that I took. Here they give us the Libra ascendant for this. So the May 14, 1948, 4 p.m. This is from AstroTheme, which is reliable enough. And we've never had a Uranus return, okay? We haven't gotten there just yet. But what did we have? We had a Uranus opposition, or we had a Uranus square. So I'm going to take a look at signification of Uranus. What happened in Israel whenever Uranus was doing something? Now, at this moment, if you take a look at Israel's sun here at 24 degrees 40 minutes Taurus, this sun is dangerously close to a fixed star called Algol, Medusa Gorgon, and Algol is mundanely quite a tricky planet, quite a tricky fixed star, quite a tricky point. It can have, on a mundane level, quite some deaths. Okay, and Lada Duncheva quotes, I don't remember who she quotes when she said it's bodies upon bodies. Okay, so this is on a mundane level. The sun here is in 23, it's very close to Algol, it's within orb. You wouldn't say it's not on the degree, or maybe it is here, because that was 49. And that in itself is a signification. This means that this country goes through very deep and intricate experiences as a country. Okay. Uranus. Okay, I'm not going to go on to the chart because we only have this much time. But Uranus is in the 8th house, and it is in 24 degrees Gemini. So let's first take a look at when are we going to have this Uranus return. So right now, as you can see, Uranus will go over Israel's sun. We already have revolutions. We already have attempts to outthrow regimes. We already have violent attacks of protesters. We have protesters of various streams, okay? And it's a country in a revolution right now. So this is Uranus going through Israel's sun. Internal havoc, chaos, radicalism, it is co-present with Jupiter, and so we run the risk of, unfortunately, having a religious revolution. Okay. Of course, what I would like is for it to be secular, not because I do not like God, but because it has been proven time and again that every regime, every country that has separation from the state and religion, both religion and the state flourish. Whereas in countries like 79 Iran, okay, after the revolution, we see it's very problematic to unite the religion with the regime, and the country suffers, and the people suffer as well. People flee in Iran, so we know it's not, yeah, it's not that the word necessary changes needed. And I'm just reading this wonderful book by Marina Namat, which sounds it sounds a Russian Israeli name, but it is not. And is basically wrote a Prisoner of Tehran about the 79 revolution. She was a prisoner. She herself, she's an autobiographic, was a prisoner there at the jail of the Shah, so before the revolution, and was tortured there, and eventually fled Iran to be in Canada. So the book was published in 2007, and she spent her life, being a waitress in Canada until she could no longer not tell her story. And I just, was at my parents without my phone, and I found this book, and I'm like, this is pretty much the only book that I could read at this time, and it's highly, highly relevant to our times, and unfortunately to my country, okay, my motherland. So this is Uranus on Algol right now. Uranus is in 22nd degree of Taurus. Jupiter will be co-present with Uranus, very close to Algol, if not on Algol. And I'm talking here about, the next time Uranus will be in Gemini, but hey, we really have a moment here in history, because the co-presence of Jupiter and Uranus, well, it can be absolutely gorgeous for a lot of sciences, it's philosophy, spirituality, science, downloads, but unfortunately it can also mean a radical religious revolution, and while I absolutely do not like, and Venus will be ruling Ketu when this happens, so what I absolutely do not like for this to happen, I cannot ignore that this is a possibility. And for many of us Israelis is a question. Okay, if people want this to be like, Shah or Sharia or whatnot, or Khomeini, then okay, maybe the right course is not to fight the people that want this, but to look for places where we can live and let live, and maybe look for new lands or new countries, or establish new communities that come in peace, and understand that sometimes peoples need to find their own place, and it's not but good for some people, not good for everybody, and we don't all have to live in one country. So Uranus will be in Gemini 24 degrees on July 1st, 2031, and on January 17, 2032. Okay, also on April 13, 2032. So this means that just this point of 24 Gemini will be passed 3 times. And if we wonder if Israel goes and survives this, whichever, the identity of Israel will not be the same. And with the co-presence of Jupiter, I am afraid that there can be radical religion, radical philosophy, and radicalism in general. So it's not a nice time. But whatever Israel will come after this, granted that we won't have another declaration of independence, we are going to look at the Uranus return is going to be touched 3 times. Okay, so Uranus direct, retrograde, and direct on this point is going to happen between July 1st, 2032, January 17, 2032, 2031, sorry, July 1st, 2031, January 17, 2032, and then April 13, 2032. And you can see here just by the April here that it's very likely to be co-present or in the shade of an eclipse. Not going to go too deep into this point, because what I want right now is actually to look at this chart and see what happened in previous times when the Israeli chart was triggered by Uranus. So for the first thing that comes to mind is actually 23, yeah, we're gonna do 23 and 40 minutes, which is the original sun for Israel. And this would be Taurus. Yeah, we'll go to Virgo, yes, but we're gonna go to Taurus too. Not from here, because I want to do from, let's say 50, so it will be after. Oh, yes, from year 1950. Okay, so a year after. So we only have today. Makes sense. We only have it once. So right now, May 23rd, 2024 is where Israel, and then December 2024, and then again on March 2025. So between 2024, 2025, just before Uranus delves into Gemini, it's going to be revisiting Israel's sun. And yes, the unfortunate risk is of radical religious revolution. I just want to take a look at one chart. So one chart here is with Uranus in Gemini. Okay. One chart here is with Uranus in Gemini. When this happens, one chart here is 2024. Again with Jupiter in Gemini, it's the 23rd degree, and the 24th degree, the closest, is on with Jupiter and Venus on the anaretic degree. Okay, that's the most potent one where I'm more concerned, because Jupiter in Gemini tells me that there are rivals in religious rivals. Okay, rival philosophies. Okay, Jupiter in Venus sign with Venus, although Jupiter-Venus is a lovely conjunction, okay? The anaretic degree is culmination of something. But this co-presence with Uranus on Israel's sun, okay, Uranus in Taurus, 22 degree, and very much, okay, it's a separate in aspects, very much in effect of the days before it or the months before it. It's going to be Venus crossing over, and then it's going to be Jupiter crossing over Uranus. That can give us a revolution. And the moon here is growing. The moon is growing, okay? So this is the beginning of something. It's very difficult. But now I want to go back. And I want to go back to the 24 degrees with Uranus. And we go, you know what, I will do it on the minute because 24, 21. The reason I'm doing this on the minute because Uranus takes some time and I want to be as accurate as I can. And my prediction is that the reason that I will be finding out new things here will be revealed organically around the episode, because I have a prediction around this. And so the first point that I'm going to look at is, when was Uranus in this degree, okay, 24 degrees Sagittarius. Why Sagittarius? Because if the return is 80 years, then the opposition should be around 40 years, 40 something years. And I want to see what happened when Uranus was opposition, okay? And I'm doing the Uranus cycles, okay? I'm not yet touching Uranus opposition Sun. We might get into that. Just do Uranus opposition. So Uranus opposition was in 1987. January 14, 1987, June 25, 1987, and November 4, 1987. Now, let's look at charts. Okay, that was the opposition. Got Uranus here. Saturn was co-present, and in this particular one, Venus was co-present. I would expect some religious upheaval, religious issues to do. Now we're going to take a look at the news. Now, I speak Hebrew, so I will have to translate for you and see what happened in Israel. You know what? Let's see if we have something in English. Israel, 1987. Israel. So thank you, Wikipedia. Events. Hussein and Shimon Peres signed the London Agreement. This is 11 April. During a secret meeting held at the Lord Mishkan in London. Okay, so the agreement with Jordan. Okay, now I know we had, let's see, what is this London Agreement? So April 11, 1987, also present. Okay, overview. Agreement outlined the framework for international peace conference hosted by the United Nations. The peaceful solution to the Arab-Israeli conflict based on Resolution 242 and 338 for peaceful solution of the Palestinian problem in all its aspects. Okay, where in 2023 we do not have a peaceful solution or a solution to how to divide the land. So 19 April, Dan Shomron is appointed as 13th Chief of Staff. Okay. 9 May. So we had the Eurovision. Okay. What is IAI-LAVI program? Fourth generation multi-role jet fighter developed in Israel during the 1980s. The decision was controversial due to enormous associated costs. So this was cancelled. So the ultimate cancellation of the aircraft by the Israeli government during the flight test phase. So this type of jet planes was cancelled. I don't see anything necessarily Uranus, yes, it's aviation, but it was just, okay, they canceled this. Landau Commission published the report. Zohar Gov commits suicide. So he's a famous Israeli singer, but it's not something I would, although suicide is associated with Uranus, it's not something I would associate with Israel. Okay, so he was arrested for rape charges and he committed suicide in jail. It's just, it's one Israeli person. Okay. So we had terror attacks or... Okay. This a rumor which spread among Palestinians that the crash was deliberate and made in retaliation for the murder of an Israeli businessman in Gaza City 2 days earlier sparked the first intifada the next day. So we had the first intifada. So intifada basically protests and violate riots by guerrilla wars, for Palestinians, attempting to basically liberate Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So it began, and so we would have a couple of, some call it revolts, attempts to liberate basically the West Bank, attempts to liberate Gaza, okay, through martial means. Yes, so guerrilla war, terror, whichever you frame it. And this was happening, the first intifada happened when Uranus was opposing Uranus. Okay, so this is something I would totally this is something I would totally associate with Uranus doing something. And Uranus in Sagittarius, this intifada was about an attempt to liberate, okay? Fighting for freedom, revolutionize to freedom. First intifada. So first intifada would be on 9 December 15, Ariel Sharon. Okay. In a controversial move amid Arab protests, Israeli Trade and Industry Minister Ariel Sharon, whom we also know from other episodes in the international arena, entertained many prominent Israeli figures in a housewarming party at the apartment he rented in the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem's Old City. Okay, so he decided on the Intifada to make a move and be present in the Old City of Jerusalem in the Muslim quarter. As can be many things associated with that. Notable Palestinian militant operation against Israeli targets. Okay, so that's so this is 97. The attacks themselves. Okay, so this marks the Uranus. This is something that I would predict. Okay, Intifada makes sense. And Sagittarius for Israel, if we get this ascendant with Libra, Sagittarius is the third house, so neighboring nation, neighboring not yet country, but what was supposed to be a country, is basically attacking Israel. This is in the vicinity, in the Nähe sozusagen, and this is in the third house, with Jupiter for Israel in the third house, so 27 degrees. So this was also, notice how Uranus, it was in 24 degrees, but Jupiter here is 27 degrees. Okay, that means this is very much not only the Sagittarius is over Jupiter, but Jupiter for Israel is in Sagittarius around this point. So we had an extra religious flavor to this liberation war, or attempts to liberate from occupation, and so on and so forth. So that was the Uranus opposition. Now we're going to go to the two Uranus squares. And one of them will be in Virgo, one of them will be in Pisces. I'm going to begin with recent times, and I'm going to do Uranus in 24 degrees Pisces and see what happened in Israel. And Uranus was in 24 degrees Pisces. I know I had. So 24, all we have to do is change. I'm going to change it to Pisces. And that happened in 2009, 2010. 2009, 2010. So Uranus and Pisces. Here we get the chart for the retrograde. Just so we'll take a look at something here. And it was co-present with Chiron, and soon to be also Jupiter. Okay, and of course Neptune. No, oh, sorry, this was Anaya. Not at all. This was Aquarius. So, to my listeners, scrap that. Uranus was only in Pisces here. Neptune was in Aquarius back then. How come? It's 2009. Yes, oh, because it was retrograde, so it was in Aquarius. And we have here an opposition, separating aspect, opposition to Saturn in Virgo. Okay, Uranus retrograde, 24 degrees Pisces. This is September 24, 2009. Separating from opposition to both Mercury retrograde in Virgo and Saturn in Virgo. So this is, okay, Saturn separating, Mercury applying. Not applying, it's also separating because it's retrograde. So this is another chart. And now let's go to see what happened in Israel in 2009. It's not long ago. So of course we know we had financial crisis, blah blah blah, but let's see what else was in there. Events, just events. Okay. Tamar, ooh. Okay. The Tamar gas field was, remember this, was discovered in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Israel. So this changes the entire geopolitical game. Israel finds natural resources, and you know how it goes, the curse of the natural resources. So the curse of the natural resources in politics and governance, or political science, whichever you learn this, is basically when a country finds natural resources, it no longer depends upon taxes. Okay? And so the equilibrium where you pay taxes and you're entitled to require the country to represent you, as what we know recently in Pakistan was no taxation without rights implementation. This contract is violated the minute the country has natural resources that are independent of taxation. Okay? Basically means your government doesn't depend on your money anymore. And so it won't do anything for you to go back to work. It doesn't care if you're starving in the street. It won't do that. It will only yield for people who go along with the regime. Here we have various countries, more corrupt, less corrupt, that do that. And here we have a problem. Okay, if the country takes this, then on the one hand, a lot of people say, oh, we want, free energy. We want not free energy, but more subsidized energy and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, there is the breaking of the equilibrium between the country being dependent on taxation. And a lot of the people, if you take a look at two declarations of independence, one is the United States, and the other is the website of Sweden. I don't know if it's still relevant, but it was absolutely relevant in 2014, 2013. The American was in God we trust. Okay, small country, as little taxation. They had to do. I don't remember which amendment was about taxation, but they had to do it. They had to re-edit it immediately. I think it was one of the first, because you have to pay taxes. The country doesn't owe you shit if you're not their employer. Okay, the country is your employee. Okay, you pay taxes, they owe you shit now. They don't owe you shit when you don't pay taxes. So we have to be very cautious when we think about building new countries, which is something that's absolutely in the spirit of the times. And the other is Sweden. And in the website of Sweden, if you got to it in 2014, you know what? Why not? Let's see if it's still there. So let's do Sweden. Recently asked to join NATO, which is incredibly scary. Advertising here. So let's go to the official side of Sweden. I want you to see this. If it still exists, I want you to see this. Sweden. welcome to Sweden. I don't think you have this anymore, but in 2014, what I would see here, let's see if I have more. No, life, climate, culture, no, it's official. Whatever, Sweden key facts, maybe this one. Okay, but if you went here in 2014, 2013, what you would see is in tax we trust. I kid you not. Okay, I made an essay about housing in Malmo, the housing crisis in Malmo, because everybody was idealizing Sweden, and I got to see, does it work for them? And now they did the same shit of not doing infrastructure outside the city and waiting for people to require less government funding within the inner city due to black markets. So the trick probably worked, even though Amsterdam is complaining about the state in Amsterdam. We no longer have in tax we trust. But those two significations, okay? In God we trust, in tax we trust. And so we see that in 2009, Israel broke the equilibrium. Now your taxation doesn't matter. They didn't manage to get all the profits. They did agreement that was actually more liberal, but actually not succumbing to the rights of the left in this very particular case could actually prove better off for the Israeli people, even though I'm all for, our employees, this government, yielding us human rights, and that means resources when we talk about political entities. So February 10, elections for the 18th Knesset, okay. We had the Likud winning, and Benjamin Netanyahu, president was Shimon Peres. Benjamin Netanyahu formed the government. And not something in particular about this. Moshe Katsav, the president, is accused of rape. The only difference is that now they are being held accountable, but that was unfortunately nothing new. Vote of confidence, 32 government is approved. Centennial celebrations open at Rabin Square. Pope Benedict visits Israel and Palestine. He condemns Holocaust denials. So we had the Eurovision. And there must be another way. 2023, we still say the same. June 8th. Okay. Okay, so this is Avram Hirschton is convicted of embezzling millions of shekels. I'm sorry, what is embezzling? Probably a form of stealing. Me'ilah. Okay, embezzling. I didn't know this word. So great fraud to do with public money. Okay, but the major thing that we saw here is natural resources that change the equilibrium. So yeah, finance minister goes to jail. Jail experience is Piscean as well. So exposure of fraud with public money, that can be. But again, not the first, not the last, not the only. Okay, the Bar Noir murder with the LGBTQ center in Tel Aviv. And now we see, this is interesting. Okay, Pisces is another Jupiter ruled sign. And here we had a shooting at the Bernois, which is basically a shooting that was aimed at the LGBTQ center in Tel Aviv, which is LGBTQ capital, not only of Israel, but also worldly. And here we have another clue to what's going wrong when Uranus sets off. Okay, so we had stuff to do with Pisces, which is money laundering, stuff to do with liquidity. Okay, so finding out gas in the sea, in the Mediterranean Sea. That's significant. That changes the fiscal equilibrium, the liquidity of the government or the state. But in terms of the people, directly, we have an LGBTQ shooting directed. And the murder in the Bernard was a very known event. And that kind of leads into, okay, it seems like a one-time event. Do not be mistaken. Just like the transgender mass shooting in the United States, it's not a one-time event. Those stories gather up to something, and I would not dismiss them at all. Dudu Topaz commits suicide as leader, so public personality, in jail by hanging himself. And he was it was in charge of assaulting top media Israeli executive. Okay, so in the entertainment industry, but that is not something I would necessarily associate. Although we previously see also the case for now that I think about this, Zohar Argov hung himself in jail on the opposition, and now we have Dudu Topaz on the square. So I didn't associate these two. I don't know if I'll see that something like this in Virgo, but also this is ruled by Jupiter that rules both Pisces and Sagittarius. So jail-related experiences, and suicide is Uranus, suicide in jail. Unfortunately, we saw two cases like this. Ehud Olmert, charged of corruption. And he's the first prime minister of Israel to face criminal charges. Okay, so he got himself into jail. So we had a prime minister in jail. Okay, for corruption. Very much Pisces themes. Corruption, jail, isolation, and with Uranus, unfortunately, suicide. Israeli Air Force F-16A crashes while training. Oh, killing Asaf Ramon. Asaf was the son of Ilan Ramon, who was killed in the space shuttle Columbia in 2003. So yes, that was this was aviation disaster. The previous one, we had the cancellation of an aircraft that was designed by Israel. So we have, also aviation, Jupiter, okay? Aviation mishaps, unfortunately, which I didn't think could be associated, but unfortunately it is. We are also seeing the co-presence of Uranus and Jupiter. There are some aircraft stuff, which is like some aircraft got, like weird stuff happening with aircraft, and unfortunately we might see something like that. September 24, in an address, United Nations General Assembly in New York, Netanyahu said Iran poses a threat to the peace in the world, and this is the same Netanyahu is doing the same mistakes of Iran, unfortunately, right now, with all honoring of what he did that I agree or not agree with. Poses a threat to the peace of the world, and that is incumbent on the world body to prevent it from obtaining nuclear weapon. Yes. September 25, the trial of former Israeli Minister Olmert, so he's brought to trial. Um, what? Operation Four Species? It's Navy Commandos. It's Navy Commandos, okay? It's nothing else. Shade 13 and MV Franco cargo ship in the Mediterranean Sea. Oh, okay. So this is the Sona Shayetet. Basically, so MV Franco cargo ship was seized by the Israeli Navy commandos of Shayetet 13, Shayetet 13, okay. In eastern Mediterranean Sea, and its cargo of hundreds of tons of weapons allegedly found from the Islamic Republic of Iran and Hezbollah in Lebanon. This was a great disaster because there were people on this ship. Okay, if it is, yeah, it's German-owned Antigua and Barbuda flagged merchant cargo ship. If I'm not mistaken, this is associated. I'm not sure. No, it's not associated. It's something else. It's a cargo ship, so I don't think it's the same case what I'm talking about. But again, something to do, Pisces trying to smuggle weapon into Israel. It's been stopped, and that was November 4. Oh, okay. So there is this company, this Intel in Israel, and 1,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews demonstrate outside the office of U.S. firm Intel in Israel to protest at work taking place on the site on Jewish Shabbat. Okay, so religious protest. Okay, Jupiter, Pisces, Uranus, religious protest. Makes sense. So Israeli wins chemistry Nobel Prize. That is Ada Yonat. A woman won, I think, yes. Yes, for her studies on the structure of the ribosome. First Israeli woman to win Nobel Prize. I don't know, like, okay. I don't know if that's related to Uranus square or not. And December 12th, Israeli government passes highly controversial bill calling for the creation of biometric database for all Israeli citizens. Pay attention, okay? Those who've heard my story in Netherlands know my experience with those fingerprints. And by the way, fingerprints are not unique. It's something you need to keep in mind for all Israeli citizens, which would contain their fingerprints and facial contours. Okay, so this happens in December 12th. So identity digitized, okay, Pisces, things to do with identity theft, and Uranus technology. So identity around the technology, that is of course highly controversial, not ever used in favor of the citizen, and highly hackable and distorted very quickly. So yes, that was, yeah. Those were the things that happened in the square. Now let's go to Virgo. And same thing. Now I'm going to go to Virgo, so we delve back in the past. We try to get a clearer picture of those Uranus events. And this was 1966, 1967, even I, okay? And I see that it did not come up organically, so I'm going to tell you. In 1995, I think, President Yitzhak Rabin was murdered. We recently had Saturn returned from that. I was 12 years old. At the time, I was very interested in politics. And our president is being, prime minister, is being murdered. He was the only prime minister, I think, not the only, but it's one of the few that had the Pisces. Okay, at this point, which funnily enough, only when I will get funding for studies and I would go to study politics and governance, because I thought about international relations. It was more like the closest to traveling for me. But at this point, 12 years old Shirley writes a text that today I consider fascist, and it is about a body that loses its head cannot function. Okay, very fascist, and you must understand this. I was 12, I did not know a thing about fascism, but the allegory of, or the analogy between a political entity and the body, okay, is modernly, I'm not talking about Hobbes, okay, modernly considered was only enacted and practiced in fascist regime. Literally, Mussolini saw the people as cells in the body of the nation, which is cases. So people were like cells, organisms in the body of the nation. So you can imagine how easily we lose cells versus how easily or not easily, how not easily we are ready as a country to lose humans. Okay, when we change the analogy and people are not cells in the body of the country that can easily be eliminated and rejuvenated, even encouraged. Okay, we peel our skin when we want to do a good facial. And look at the differences. Okay, this is why when people talk about dehumanization or consider it a hubris to see the soul or the anima or whatnot in living beings, I say, as hubris as it is to think that your shoes are talking to you, it's not anywhere near as terrible and as destructive as dehumanization and not seeing humans as divine beings. So yeah, 96. And so now we go to why a lot of things are new to me, because I said I no longer do politics, and I no longer talk about politics, I no longer do anything. I felt helpless, none of this is working. Don't talk to me about politics. I became a filmmaker. Okay, 2 years later I will start doing filmmaking. Back then I did journalism. So so that is how many things about my country I don't know. The wars, that is, not only because they didn't educate us, because I didn't self-educate myself. I gave up at 12. I was like, I cannot. I lift my hands. No, how can anybody be a leader in this country if this is okay? This is the thought of a 12 years old. There are many things I didn't know, but that's that. 1967, I think it doesn't even take an Israeli to know what happened there. So the 1967, if you hear about people talk about Israel should go back to 1967 borders. Okay? What are they talking about? Why 1967? Why not 48? Why 1967? So Israel. So the hot topic, green line. This is the pre-1967 border. Okay, is the democration. It's the first time I hear democration outside of the democration question of the sciences. Line out of the 1949 armistice agreements between the armies of Israel and Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria after the 48 Arab-Israeli War. It served de facto the border of the Israeli state from 49 until the Six-Day War in 1967. This is a topic that anybody that wants to say something about this region, Israel and Palestine, you really, at least the basics, you must understand. What is 1967 borders? Why are people talking about? Even I know that. So the Six-Day War is, let's read about it, okay? And this happened at the Uranus square when Uranus was in Virgo. The 6th Day War, מלחמת ששת הימים. Anaska, the setback, okay, Harb. War of 67, or June War. Again, June War was happening in June. Okay, sun. Where is the sun is going over this Uranus in Gemini, and it's going over Gemini, activating this Uranus, and Uranus is being squared by Uranus in Virgo. Also known as the Arab-Israeli War, or the Third Arab-Israeli War, fought between Israel and a coalition of Arab states, primarily Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, from 5 of June to 10 June 1967. Let's take a look at our little chart here. So we had January 67, September 67, December 66. And so we're going to take a look at what happened around these times. So yeah, basically, I'm not going to go all the way here, but basically it was big war. Israel was not predicted to win this war because there were so many countries, and they tried again, after 40, the Arab-Israeli war, they tried again. Maybe we can this time do something. As around the Suez Canal, there was a conflict and this and that, and Israel occupied, okay, this was happened, okay. By the 6th day of the conflict, Israel had occupied the entire Sinai Peninsula. So, on the 5th day, Syria joined the war by shelling Israel position in the north. Egypt and Israel and Jordan agreed to ceasefire on 8 June and Syria on 9 June. It was signed in Israel with the 11th June. 6-day war resulted in more than 20,000 Arab casualties, with Israeli losses standing at fewer than 1,000 casualties. Alongside the combatant casualties were the deaths of 20 Israeli civilians killed in Arab forces airstrikes in Jerusalem, 15 UN peacekeepers killed by Israeli strikes at the Sinai at the outset of the war, which of course would be a pivotal point. It's not the final one. The final one is at 73. Okay? The final one is at 73. Since 73, you are allowed to criticize Israel in academic discourse worldwide. Before that, it was very difficult. And U.S. Liberty incident for Israeli Air Force struck United States Navy Technical Research Ship. So, this is where Israel becomes a new country, from a new country that had to fight for its survival, independence war, to an occupying country. So Israel seized Golan Heights, Jordanian West Bank, which we gravel with until today, including East Jerusalem, Egypt, Sinai Peninsula, which we later returned, and partially Golan, as well as Egyptian-occupied Gaza Strip. Okay, this is the source of all our troubles. Too much of a good thing. But then one would argue that in the political climate we dealt with, we sort of had to do this thing to prove that we are powerful. Now we deal with this and nobody really knows what to do. And that is, it's those borders, okay, in the Virgo, Uranus thingy. Virgo is an earth sign, okay. Sagittarius is a fire sign. What did we have? Intifada, fire, boom, boom, boom. Pisces is a water sign. What did we have? Ship stopped, gas discovered, People hung themselves in jail. Ministers, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert goes to jail. So we can see how the element plays a role here. Uranus square Uranus, and also we must understand that the Uranus and the Pisces are shaped in so that the square from Uranus and Virgo, okay, to Uranus and Gemini, it was an opening square. Okay, it's an opening. It's the beginning square. There's an opening. We have from the conjunction, we move, and then we open. It's like a watch. We open, and then we get to the square. The Pisces is the closing square. It's the closing square. So this is a cycle. I think this is what people refer to as a synodic cycle, or synodic is between. I don't know. Okay, but it's a cycle in astrology where we have the opening, the opposition, and the closing of a circle. The opening of a circle, we start something new. From the opposition back to the conjunction, just like with the lunation, we finalize, we complete, we let go of the old, we have a completion, a closure of something. Okay? So you think about the moon is easiest to explain. New moon, something starts. Full moon, we begin to let go. Okay, so we have full exposure, something is blooming, reaching its fullness. Now it's beginning to let go. Decreasing moon, we let go of what no longer serves. Increasing moon, we manifest, we grow things. Decreasing moon, we contract things. Same with every planet. Okay, we open and then we close. And Israel opened. Now before 2009, we had 2000, I think, 6 or 4, where we had the Hitnatkut. We also gave up some land. Okay, and but Pisces is more to do like with fiscal, with liquidity, with what's at sea as well. So the bounties of the sea, so to sagen. So bounties of the sea is I completely butchered the context for this one. It was used by Austin Kopok in the astrology podcast for Jupiter in Pisces to describe something completely different. But here it was the bounties of the sea on a literal gas found at sea. But also people going to jail and also having to stop ships that try to smuggle weapons from Iran and Hezbollah. So stuff like that. But then the Virgo, okay, mutable earth, occupation. Okay? So it was a big win with a lot of drama and a lot of baggage that Israel and Palestine will have to carry for quite a while. And it's also shown the world that Israel is not so much the one to take, bullying. Is not so much the one to take this type of relations. And so you must acknowledge Israel. You cannot threaten the existence of Israel without Israel going nuggets, completely nuggets. Same has happened with Hezbollah, with, I don't remember what years, that 3 Israeli soldiers were kidnapped, and we went to a full-blown operation. Hezbollah, the leader said that he did not expect us to go this crazy over 3 soldiers, and he returned them in caskets. I mean, they immediately killed them and had this huge, very picturable, yes, absolutely, you can't say photogenic on that, but a very picturesque, the same horrid view of those 3 soldiers returning in caskets. Again, this is already showing the behavior of this country is kind of like, you are not going to mess with this country without severe consequences, and in the climate that we are living in, you can't argue that it is not necessary for any country, okay, not just Israel, to do so. But we also seen how Uranus in Virgo is not, and this one was not, it was in between, okay, it was in between the Uranus square, but it's in the context of this Uranus square, okay? And the most important thing we have has to do with land and revolutionizing the borders of the Israeli state. Okay, so you see, it's not just the opening, closes, opening, increasing land. In this case, it was increasing land because if the original position is in Gemini, where is the square? In Virgo. What is a Virgo? Mutable land, so borders moving. Okay, what's happening? An increase from the vantage point of Israel, an increase. So increasing land. Okay, if our original position was to begin with Sagittarius, okay, then we might have actually lost, because Pisces is also lost, or we might have gained marine, like marine stuff, and the entire position of Israel could go nuggets, because what if we had this gas issue not in 2009 but in 1967, okay? We might be like a corrupted country that people are suffering, and only there's such huge gap between the rich and the poor. And I know I'm beginning to sound like Israel today, but believe me, there was a lot to Israel that was dictated by the fact that we gained land first, and not only that, it affected the internal affairs. So just a slip of to get you to understand something in these wars, in this 1967 war, the 6-day war, begin. The one who most capitalized on those wars, that were both the 73 and the 67 wars, was Prime Minister Menachem Begin. And the reason I'm saying this, because a lot of people might be tempted to compare Itamar Ben-Gvir to Menachem Begin. Why? Both Itamar Ben-Gvir and Menachem Begin were also guerrilla warriors. Both of them planned to coup, a coup in order to catch the regime, okay, with force. So Itamar Ben-Gvir was a member of Kahana, which is radical right wing in Israel. That did not avert to guerrilla wars even after Israel had an army. And Menachem Begin as well was a part of, okay, this is Mapai, but I'm wanting to, yeah. Okay, I don't remember exactly which, but the thing is, he was also part of guerrilla wars. The difference is very important. Look, I'm going to enlarge it as much as I can. And I'm going to show you, because the picture tells 1,000 words. What do you see here? In here, you see this line from his skull to the air. No kippah. Secular Jew. Secular. Doesn't matter, Jew, Christian. I'm not telling you this story as a tale of Israel. I'm telling you as a tale of any land. No religious clothing whatsoever. Secular Jew. You're secular. Put the word Jew aside. Secular. Okay, he was secular. Ben-Gvir, religious. I want to show you the picture of Ben-Gvir so you can understand the comparison, so you can see for your eyes. What is the difference and how important is the difference? Two people, both of them had to do with terror or guerrilla war. You should see here above the head is a kippa. Okay? And the kippa itself doesn't tell me anything much. But when it comes to the adjoining of being willing to use violent means to occupy something without having radical ideology. Okay? Being pragmatic, but being willing to use violence to catch the regime, versus being radical of any religion or non-religion. Okay? We talk about communism, we talk about Nazism, we talk about fascism, that were ideology-based regimes, and they didn't have, a religion, but they were as radically dogmatic or radically in ideology. And then we have a lot of difference between these two. Okay, so it's very important to notice, to understand that people will try to make this comparison to understand why is it not an accurate comparison. A mistake here could cost your country. So he capitalized the most on the change following 67 and later following 73. And I will touch on 73. And this is not about Israel. This is about a country that wins a war. Israel. Yom Kippur War. Yom Kippur War. So, Yom Kippur War of 73. And any country, okay, I want you to take an algorithm from here, not Israel. If you see this video, all you see is Israel, you've seen nothing, because many countries are going to be founded at the coming years and decades. And many countries are dealing with similar things. It's not an Israel lesson. So Yom Kippur, October War, and it was on the Sinai Peninsula and Golan Heights that were occupied in 67. And the ending of this war, Egyptians occupied the Suez Canal, with the exception of Israeli crossing point near the Versoix air base. Okay, so Israel does manage to catch something in Egypt. And gets very close to Damascus. I want to see the ending of the war. Okay, that's a lot of text. I want to see aftermath. Okay. Israel had to withdraw from 20 to 40 kilometers with UN forces buffering the area. Still held two-thirds of Sinai. Now, what is important in these wars? And now there is a Chiron return from the 73 war. That is another teaching that I will get to in another episode, because I do want to keep it Uranus related. And Menachem Begin is very Uranus related, okay? I'm not going to go into his chart. It's very interesting, but it's not something I can easily generalize on. The point is, why did he earn so much from these two wars? In these two wars, the people who were fighting, the soldiers and were being killed, were no longer just the elite Ashkenazi Zionist Jews. Okay? And in his campaign, he mentioned those people that came from North Africa, from the Middle East, that were considered second grade, okay, were by the elites and were marginalized and were discriminated against. He capitalized on this crowd and said, no, this is not, just bummers. These are people who fought and risked their lives. And now he was the first politician to capitalize on the growing gap. That was also, around that was the time of the Black Panthers in Israel. Okay. And the word black might be misleading because it's not the color of the skin so much so as what we consider, Black Americans or Black people in Africa. But it was more brown tone relative to somebody coming from Poland or Ukraine or Germany. And that capitalization on this crowd by a Polish Jew, okay, totally Ashkenazi Polish Jew, that understood that you have a crowd here, and the first person who will see people eye to eye and not discriminate against them, at least in speech, and will apply to them, is the first person to take this. And he took this election. He did whatever he wanted with the state of Israel. He withstood isolation of Israel and allowed Israel to take a stand towards choosing which one of the P5s do we want to work with, rather than being chosen, with a lot of sacrifice in the fiscal internal economy. Okay, we had the Tsena, which was a time where people were waiting to receive food. So there was a lot of controversy around this, but he definitely did certain moves that were very bold and successful. Okay, to a large extent successful, and that's why he also he stood as the Prime Minister of Israel from, let's note this, this is 6-day war. I want to do this, begin, not green line, begin. Where's my begin? Okay, begin. I want to say Menachem Ben-Gvir. So he served as a prime minister between 21 June 1977 and 10 October 1983. Okay. That was, as you can see, quite some time. One of the most well-known prime ministers of Israel. So this also shows you that when these Uranus waves come, the first politician, the first leader who will capitalize on applying to marginalized societies takes the elections. And when he takes it, you can see it took some time to return. Before that, during that, he was Minister of Defense in 1980, 81, and 83. And between 67 and 70, he was Minister in the Prime Minister's office. Okay. Was born in 16 August 1983, Brent Grondot government, Russian Empire, Belarus, which is now Poland. So that's just Uranus cycles. And this is the power of Uranus to change the face of a nation, to change the relation between the state and the people and the masses, okay, whether it's through the gas, okay, course of resources, through occupying land, through liberation wars, intifada. Of course, you probably are going to say, okay, what about Uranus to the sun? What about this? What about that? We can go on and on and on and on and But I think that gives us an example that we can generalize about what happens when Uranus does something. And so Uranus 24, Gemini civil, Uranus upheavals, so civil upheavals, civil protests, civil wars between people and themselves. We already see it a bit or a lot happening nowadays when Uranus is crossing over the sun, but we can't ignore the location of the sun. Okay, it's not just any sun, it's a sun that is very much in the vicinity of Algol. Okay, so women rights, digitation of we have cameras everywhere, people putting cameras, cutting trees, okay, kind of weird stuff happening that happen on a global scale. But here it's a country that's very much at the focal point because it happens on the country's sun. Okay? And therefore I wanted to focus on Uranus to Uranus, not just Uranus to Sun, because as you can see, the square of Virgo and the square of Pisces were looking different, both because it's Virgo and Pisces, but also because it was growing with Uranus and decreasing with Pisces. The power of the government also decreases. If we had Uranus in Sagittarius, okay, perhaps we would have like intifadas for Uranus returns. And we had the closing square of Virgo, then it would be about losing land rather than gaining land. Yes, can also gaining land. Like it's Uranus, it's unexpected, but think about how these things can change. And then the Pisces with the gas stuff, that could be about ending up with the curse of resources, because that would be a growing. When it's decreasing, it means the power of the government in face of the people who invested in this gas that were private investors. It's true, they did it with our own bonds, guess with our own money. But there was this argument that the power of the government weakened because they did not take all the gas. If it was a growing one, maybe the country, the government will take this gas, and then we had a complete other type of distortion happening. So you can see how these things can turn around. None of these had to do with Rabin per se, which was a surprise to me because I was sure that that we'll see it. Although Rabin was murdered in 95, which was within the scope of the Uranus opposition. Okay, because we had 83. No. Sorry, no, not at all. Not at all. So yeah, it's very interesting. You see also how the murder of a prime minister was not at all related to this Uranus cycle. Okay, the prime minister that was murdered in Israel was Yitzhak Rabin. Nada. Okay, it's not important for the Uranus cycle. This one person. But what did we do see? We see suicides in jail of people from the entertainment industry. We've seen Air Force stuff for the Jupiter presence probably. And we have seen presidents, with the Pisces, we've seen presidents going to jail. Okay, so that was a part, but what you would think would be significant, that is, wait, I have to return. Sorry, I have to return to this call, so I can't answer it right yet. Yeah. I have to return this call, but I will just go out, and now you already got pretty much the picture. And yes, I'll see you in another episode.